Hello, Donal here, psychotherapist and counselling tutor. In this quite short presentation, we're going to look at the triangle of conflict in therapy. Any psychodynamic model will see that the difficulties clients have will often be rooted in unconscious conflicts. And a straightforward way to look at how this plays out and how, as therapists, we can understand what's happening with our client is a version of what's known as Malin's triangle. There are two, but in this session we're looking at the triangle of conflict. They were developed by Dr. David Malin and are frequently used by practitioners of ISTDP. That simply is intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy. In other words, time-limited psychodynamic therapy, and time-limited is usually taken to mean 40 sessions or fewer. As we engage in life and in relationships with other people, we experience emotions, particularly the core emotions like love, anger, grief, fear, and guilt. These feelings are normal and they serve a function. They help us to stay emotionally and psychologically healthy. However, as children, some people learn that some of their emotions are not acceptable, and sometimes they're punished for expressing them. Some are physically punished, but it could also come in the form of dismissal, abandonment, rejection, a disapproving look, silent treatment, and perhaps lots of others that are less obvious. When this happens, these basic feelings become linked to anxiety. The child becomes anxious because they fear that if they express their feelings fully, the attachment bond with the caregiver will be threatened or destroyed. And because anxiety is a very uncomfortable state, we try to avoid it by turning to defenses. They mask the anxiety and the original threatening emotions. But the difficulties arise because the defenses themselves destroy our quality of life and our relationships when they're overemployed, employed inappropriately, or simply just don't work anymore. So in therapy, you'll help your client to identify and feel their true feelings and have experience of not being punished or abandoned, but valued unconditionally. And that's how defenses are broken down and the person begins to have a more fulfilled and productive life. So let's, to get you started, just look at a couple of examples. Let's say your true feeling is grief, but feeling it fully is making you anxious because you learned early on that feeling the real sadness and loss meant that you were weak or unable to cope. So instead you employ the defense of intellectualization. So you might talk about, let's say it was a bereavement, you might talk about the details of someone's illness, the time they spent in hospital, the minute detail of the funeral, but not about how you feel, not about the loss, not about the sadness, not about the grief. This invokes too much anxiety and discomfort. What about rationalization? Well, at the moment, we're very close to the presidential election in the United States. Every day and several times a day, we're hearing Donald Trump talk about a rigged election and interference in the polling system that would favor his opponent. At the same time, we're seeing poll after poll show Joe Biden pulling ahead and looking more likely to become the next president. Now, we can only hypothesize here, but let's say that what we hear about Trump's early years is true, that he was treated badly by his father. He always had to be strong. Being sick or unwell was weakness. If he didn't always win, he was a complete loser and a failure. Then we can understand the rationalization of a rigged election being a way to avoid of being a failure and a complete loser, and perhaps being punished all over again by whoever or whatever represents his father in the present. And don't forget that client isn't consciously aware that they're using these defense mechanisms. They're unconscious. Okay, so you have a look now at some of the other common defense mechanisms and see if you can work out what the anxiety might be and how you might help your client to begin to break them down. And as always, I hope that was helpful.